Today's episode is all about content creation and making money online. I want to make this as simple as humanly possible and just share some insights on what has helped me. And one of the things that I realized, it actually all started from a simple book called The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. So The Creative Act, this is like a book that I picked up years ago, and we were on a honeymoon, my wife and I want to paint you this picture. It's a beautiful cruise ship, blue skies everywhere, waves are crashing, and people are sitting by the pool enjoying their time. Beautiful place to be. And here me and my wife are just reading. Just reading. We were pretty heavy in the business at this point, and we kind of made a rule. Hey, we're not going to bring anything related to work. So we negotiated and said, hey, you know what? Let's just bring a book. Fun book to read. And I saw Rick Rubin on Joe Rogan podcast talking about this book. So I picked it up and I was, now's a good time. It's not business related. So I'll be able to just sit back and enjoy reading it and not think about business too much. I was incredibly wrong. For those that don't know who Rick Rubin is, he's a music producer. Worked with Run DMC, Aerosmith, System of a Down, like you name it, Kendrick Lamar, you name it, he's worked with them. And he's famously said he actually doesn't know how to make music. He doesn't know how to play any musical instruments. He just has really good taste. It's pretty much it. And so I'm reading this book, and keep in mind, at this point in my business journey, I created content simply to generate leads for my business. That was the sole purpose. That was the reason behind it. That's all I really cared about. And as a result of that, for years, I would create a piece of content every single day, specifically on Instagram, with the sole purpose of growing my business. And it worked, except for the fact that at some point, I remember scrolling through Instagram, and I look at one of my pieces of content, and I go, I would never watch this. And I followed the advice of most people. Everyone said, well, Raylen, you don't create for you create for your audience. It's not about you. Well, not making it about me made it horrible to create. So I was at this kind of crossroads where I was like, I don't really want to make content anymore. But the fact is what I'm going to do, because that's where all my business comes from. So I pick up this book, and early on in the book, Rick Rubin's talking about how everyone's an artist. They use different tools. Maybe the artists use a paintbrush and a canvas to make their art, but the business owner, the entrepreneur, creates offers that serve people. They create programs and workshops. They create things, just a different canvas. And that's when something kind of switched. I realized that, no, I am a creator. I just don't create like everybody else. I just need to find my way of creating. I think the thing that was holding me back in the creation space was I never accepted the fact that I was a creator. I just happened to create content for my business. And because of that, again, I burnt out. So as I'm reading this book, he talks about falling in love with the process, that you don't create for your audience. When you create for your audience, you maybe make, if you're a musician anyway, you get the platinum plaques and whatever they're called, and you make the money, but at some point you stop wanting to create. You fall out of love with the process. It becomes formulaic. It's boring. And that's exactly what was happening to me. It's exactly what was happening to me. So I wanted to make a change. So I started looking at creating content a little bit differently. And I started creating it for myself. And I played a little experiment. What if I stopped making that kind of content that I don't like to actually make? That, sure, was growing my business, but at the same time, I just don't like doing it. If I keep going this route, I'm going to stop making content altogether. So got to figure something out. And when I made this switch, I wasn't generating as much leads at first. But then I started noticing the comments that were coming in were way more thoughtful. People were actually engaging in a way that they never had. And then I started to see the right kind of clients come in. I started to see leads started to pick up again, but the right kind of leads. People that wanted to work with me, not simply because of the results I can give them, although that was a really big part of it, but because simply they knew, like, and trust me, as we should be creating. So what was the shift? The shift was me recognizing the fact that as a creator, I can create things, right? I create programs and workshops, and that's a piece of art. I just have to take that same kind of skill set and apply it to creating content in my way. And along the line of testing and figuring things out, I started falling in love with creating content again. It became fun. It became enjoyable. it became this thing that I actually looked forward to doing every day, especially recently when I figured out my process for creating. And maybe I should share with this because, some people may take this and run with it and make it their own. So what I started doing, what people say oftentimes is that creating legacy content like YouTube, for example, you make a YouTube video, you repurpose the short form content, and then that becomes maybe a blog or whatever else. I went the reverse. So what I started to do, I recognized the fact that when I was making YouTube videos, they would take me about 6 weeks to make. It was a lot of research and think about how I wanted to say things. The editing would take a long time because there's a certain editing style I wanted. And it would just take a long time. And then when it was time to turn around and do another one, I felt like I was out of practice. It just wasn't like working for me the same. So I turned things around. So what I did was I started saying, I'm going to create a short, I'm going to write something every single day. I'm going to create a piece of content every single day. I don't have to share it. I just want to get in the practice of writing every day. Again, I went back because of the fact that I said I'm a creator. All the excuses kind of left me, and I said, no, I can write. I don't have to share. I'm just going to write every day. And so what I started doing was I write 5 times a week. I write mostly 6 days a week. There's Saturdays I take off, but Monday through Friday for the most part, let's say, I write a single piece of content. I write one single thing, and that one single thing then can roll up to the next. The cool part is when I write that single thing over the next week, I compile it all together, and that turns into what you're listening to or what you're watching right now. It creates the long form. Now, where the fun begins, for me anyway, is that it's not scripted still. Yes, I have 5 pieces of content that are like almost like tools, paintbrushes. I can grab at any time. The fun part is when I record these podcasts, I don't know what I'm necessarily going to talk about or the order in which I'm going to talk about or the transitions I'm going to make. There's still some improv to it. That's what I really enjoy. I love the freedom of creating. Now I have a long form piece of content. But what do I do with the single ones? Well, one, I can put it on Threads. Number 2 is I started, I'm releasing my newsletter again. I'm redoing it. And the reason why I have to give credit where credit's due. The idea came from Joe Polish. So Joe Polish, a friend of mine, owns Genius Network, does Joe's 3-week email. What I loved about it was that 3 times a week, he publishes a newsletter, an email, and you can tell that it's just a stream of thought thing. It's just one lesson that he wants to give people. And it doesn't have to come out on like I even look back to my emails. I'm like, oh, does he have a sequence? Like everyone says, you have to be consistent. And consistency means you have to tell your audience that it gets released on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. No, not for him. It comes out when it comes out. But you're going to get 3 in a week. So with this release of the new newsletter, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I even have some flexibility here. I said earlier, right? There's about 5 pieces of content that I'm going to release in a day. Or in a week, rather. I'm going to release 5 pieces of content. Now, I'm only in this newsletter going to go up to around 3 emails. Maybe I do more. But now at least I have 5 pieces of content I can look at. And maybe some weeks I'll go, you know what? 2 of these aren't great. These 3 I'm going to roll out. Or maybe there's some times I'm going to say, hey, all 5 are good. I think these are fine. I'm going to release them. I'll put it on the newsletter. Regardless, it gives me the freedom to create. Now, again, the people that are more business-minded, they're more about, hey, how do I generate these leads with this piece of content? I'm telling you right now, this is a real-world example that happened recently where I was testing this idea of like creating vlogs on YouTube. And I wasn't talking about business. I was literally just documenting, if you will, some of these lessons, some of these ideas that I had around business and those things. And I had this buddy that was watching my YouTube content. And he's hanging out with a colleague of his. And the colleague's like, hey, I have these problems around my business, around my sales system, right? I don't feel like I have a solid enough system. This is going on, this is going on. And he goes, hey, I think you should talk to my buddy Raylen. I think he can help you. So a referral got generated and pretty high ticket workshop I put on for that person. So I reached back out to the person that gave me the referral. I said, hey, what about my content? I'm just trying to understand why this worked, right? So, what about my content made you suggest me to this person? And he goes, well, I don't know. I just felt like you could help her. And I go, well, random question, but do you know what I actually do? Do you know what my consulting agency actually does for people? And he said, no, I actually have no clue what you do. I just figured that you could help or at least point her in the right direction. So this is kind of an interesting eye-opening moment for me where I realized that like you don't have to do that. It's just the vibe. It's just the connection between the two. And because of the way that I'm creating content now, it's more actually authentically me. It's not me super scripted. Here's 3 ways you can. It's none of that anymore. It's literally just thoughts that I had throughout the week that's coming directly from me. There's no ChatGPT involved. There's no VA that's writing my content. It's just me. And it's an easy lift. It literally takes me, I set a timer for about 20 minutes to write every single day. And again, it just simply worked for me. So if you are someone who goes, I'm not a creator, maybe the lesson for you is shifting that mindset and accepting the fact you are a creator. You just use different tools than everybody else. Maybe by accepting the fact that you're a creator, you'll create not only better content, but you'll probably create, like me, better programs. Me being a creator allowed me to create this new course we rolled out called the high ticket enrollment system. That's a course, by the way, that for years people have been asking me to create, but because I wasn't a creator in my own mind, I was like, it's not me. I don't make courses. Like, it's not really my thing. I'm more of like an in-person live. Well, no, now that I'm a creator, I can create a course like that. And so I rolled it out. So for you, I want to hear your thoughts on this. What are your thoughts on this shift to becoming a creator? Have you read The Creative Act, A Way of Being? Do you think this can help you? So the next thing I want to talk about is this idea of consuming versus creating. So I mentioned earlier, right? Like, checking out Joe's newsletter, YouTube videos. There's so much content out there. And we get in this really bad habit, especially the self-improvement types, of we consume more than we create. Let's just start with self-improvement. You pick up the latest book, that leads you to another book. Next thing you know, you read 25 pages. But the question I have to ask you, and this is the hard thing you have to answer, is did you change at all? I have this buddy, Nick Peterson, wrote a book called Bumpers. It's one of my favorite books right now. And he has this line in the beginning of the book. He says, is your ability to get what you want. And learning is same situation, different behavior. Did your behavior change at all as a result of reading the book, watching the course, reading the newsletter? If the answer is no, you're consuming probably too much. And so one of the things that was hindering me, I was on a podcast recently. With my friend named Kate. She's a podcast called Create for No Reason. And probably because I talk about this stuff pretty often around the idea of creating. She invited me on, and one of the things she asked me was like, hey, imposter syndrome, comparison, they all creep up, and obviously for you it did. What was the shift you made that allowed you to start creating? The simple answer was I stopped consuming content. I was watching YouTube videos, the Matt Diavellas of the world, all these really great creators, and I would watch it and go, man, I can't make that video. And so I would make a YouTube video. I'd read Justin Welch's newsletter, go, man, I can't make a newsletter like that. Of course I can. I'm not Justin Welch. When we compare ourselves, and again, you watch the latest YouTube video, and you go, man, I can't create content like that. What you're negating or you're forgetting is the years they spent creating content like that, which got them to where they were. Go back to the first video. I guarantee it wasn't as good as the one you're watching now. You read the latest newsletter from Justin Welch, again, forgetting the fact that, again, for years, he worked on the process of creating those blog articles. You read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, and you go, man, I can never write a book like this. And by the way, this is something that I've honestly thought. I can't write a book, not like that. But then what you forget is that he had a blog that he posted on very consistently for years before he wrote that book. So consuming content is partly the problem. Doesn't mean you don't go out and get things you think will help. Like a good example is, I mentioned Justin Welch obviously a few times now, but Justin Welch, I grabbed one of his courses on creating content for LinkedIn, but I made a rule. I said for 90 days, I'm going to buy the course. I bought the course because I wanted to support him and all that. So I bought the course, but I made a rule for 90 days. I need to create a single piece of content. I need to write something once a day and then I'll get into the course. So why did I do it that way? Well, it's because I don't want to watch something that's going to inform or change the way that I personally want to write. The thing that's more important to me now today is writing like I want to write. It's creating the videos that I want to create, that I would want to watch. That is off. I hate the word authenticity, but like to create something that's authentically me, because that is important for my business. I want the right clients. I want the right people to come. So for me, I'd rather write for 90 days and then pick up when I want. It's a weird comparison, right? But I think about I used to wrestle in high school and in college, and I had this wrestling coach. And I remember, I think it was a sophomore year or something like that. Shout out to Coach Castle. He said, I'm going to give you tools. I'm going to show you hundreds of different moves and different skill sets that you could apply to your own game. You pick up what you need and you leave the stuff that's not going to fit you. So he gave us this freedom of like, hey, here's all the tools, right? Here's all the things you consume, but just take what actually works. So that's how I apply now today. I mentioned earlier, like Joe's 3-week email. That 3-week email, I'm taking the part of it where the newsletter is about me getting the thing out and helping people, and less about, hey, it has to come out on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. The podcast, for example, right? I'm shifting the way that I do the podcast. That's that way I can show up consistently, and I don't have to, every Sunday when I record, I don't have to think, oh man, I got to record a podcast. I don't want any of that. I need to create specifically for me and how I do it. But I can take things from certain people. I mentioned, my buddy Eddie, who here on YouTube, it's Your World Within. What I love about what he does is he writes a motivational speech every single day, and then he combines all of them into one single YouTube video or podcast. That's the same format I'm following here. So I picked up that, but how he does the actual video itself, how he writes, that's his thing. I'm going to kind of create my own kind of path. So I don't know, maybe as you look at what you're consuming, instead of, hey, I'm going to sign up for this webinar, if you do, cool. But like maybe the goal here is before the webinar comes out, I'm going to go and implement this one thing so I can actually have a really good idea of what doesn't work for me or what does. Maybe you go buy the course, but instead of signing up immediately and diving in immediately, you go, hey, I'm going to go and implement X, Y, and Z before I start engaging in the course. Maybe instead of scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, you make a piece of content and then you go and consume, which will inform the next day. The point is, if you consume more than you create, you're going to stop creating. But if you flip it the other way and you create more than you consume, that's when I think that magic happens, where you're starting to feel like, hey, this content is actually me. Hey, this content isn't really informed by everybody else and all of that. But I obviously want to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts about the idea of creating more than you consume? Do you feel like that balance is off for you right now? And what would happen if you actually started to create more than you consume? Now, as we create, something that I forget quite often, which is don't forget the basics. I made a post a long time ago, years ago, where I talk about don't forget what got you to the dance. So recently I'm talking to 15 seasoned consultants. These are people that work with very large companies as consultants. They're like executive coaches and those things. And I'm doing a lesson. I had 15 minutes to tell kind of explain my high ticket enrollment system, how I go about it and how I think about things. And by the way, a really fun exercise is, can you explain everything you know in 15 minutes? It's pretty tough. But anyway, so I'm going through it and I'm talking about the customer journey and going from lead capture, first of all, getting attention, then how do you capture those leads? How do you convert them into paying clients? How do you go from that to onboarding them and then multiplying them, which just simply just means referrals. And I go through this and I stop and I go, hey, any questions about what I talk about? What questions do you have about the lesson today? And this guy raises his virtual hand and he goes, hey, question, what's a lead magnet? honestly, I'm kind of floored because, again, these are not new consultants. These are consultants that have been in the game a long time, that are highly successful in helping people, built businesses for themselves. And this guy's asking me what the lead magnet is. And at that point, I paused for a minute, and I'm pretty good at talking, if you can't tell. And I didn't really have much to say. I had to stop for a minute and go, all right, let's back up. What is a lead magnet? Why is it important? What does it do? What kind of lead magnets are important? And it got me in a really good discussion. But the point of that story is, when I was explaining that, I forgot the importance of the basics. I forgot that, yeah, you can be highly successful, but you forget about the basics of running a business online. There are people today that could use the things that you think are obvious. People need literally today. Like, for example, the course I mentioned earlier, the high ticket enrollment system, the course that I just launched. In that course, I break down what makes a solid lead magnet, and then how do you transition them to convert clients. That, to me, is a pretty simple concept. But I've also met with some 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs that don't quite understand it yet. Well, Raylen, how do they get that? Well, believe it or not, there's some businesses out there that they thrive on public speaking, or they thrive on going to networking events and just meeting people and then connecting through that. Some people do cold DMing, cold calling. Like, there's so many different variations of doing it. This is just one way that's worked for me. But they may not, the reason why they didn't do it because they just don't know it yet. So it's so important to, when you're creating content, creating your next program, creating your next course, creating your next YouTube video, that you don't forget the little things, the things that matter. And I know what you're thinking, right? Like, I made this mistake too. Well, I don't really want to work with people that don't know that, because they'll be a lower type of client. I'm telling you right now, again, some of the people that have already enrolled in the course, the high ticket enrollment system, they have established 7-figure businesses, and they still reach out to me and go, man, I forgot about how do I get these sales reps that I have to diagnose the problem. I forgot about that part. I've been so removed from that section. Now I'm going to go tell my sales manager, I'm going to go tell my sales team, hey, this is something we need to implement in our business. Again, that's a pretty basic thing, at least to me, that I thought everybody knew. There's a lot of interesting people out there creating content that if you go and watch their content, like, dude, why are you talking about this? Why is this on your content? And you see them blow up and you're like, what the hell is going on? Well, yeah, it's because the basics matter. The basics a lot of people don't actually know. So the question for you is, what basics are you leaving out on your content, in your programs, that could benefit you? Because even if it's not content, maybe it's your workshops that you're running, maybe you need to pull back a little bit and start at the beginning. Explain things. I mentioned earlier the book Bumpers, right? Learning is doing something different, or doing a different behavior with the same situation. Same situation, different behavior. Let me get that again. Let me say that again. Learning is same situation, different behavior. I start every workshop with that. And the why is, you would think people know what learning is. But if you don't establish the context, if you don't do the basics in the beginning, everything maybe is for naught. So what basics are you leaving out for you? With that being said, I want you to go in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. Tell me your thoughts about what we talked about today. If you're listening to the podcast, do me a favor. Go over to YouTube. Come join us in the comments. Let us know what your thoughts are, everything we talked about today. Obviously, in the description below, I'm going to put in there where you can get the high ticket enrollment system, as well as some other resources that I have for you. As always, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something from it. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll catch you in the next one.